Ambassador Omar Samad comes from a family of Afghan diplomats with deep understanding of the history and political dynamics of Afghanistan and Pakistan. Samad has served as Afghanistan's ambassador to Canada and France, and also served as senior foreign policy advisor to the chairman of the High Council for National Reconciliation in 2021, a position that gave him insights into the power dynamics between different factions inside Afghanistan and repeated interactions with the Pakistani authorities. He is currently Senior Non-Resident Fellow with South Asia Center of the Atlantic Council in Washington, a position that necessitates close monitoring of the dynamics between Pakistan, Afghanistan, and India. This discussion with Moeed Pirzada takes place at a time when Pakistan and Afghanistan are locked into difficult negotiations over TTP, the so-called Pakistani Taliban. After Pakistan's air raids and drone strikes into Kabul and other cities, Muslim nations Qatar and Turkey had offered help to achieve a ceasefire. But the second round of talks at Istanbul, Turkey, has failed to resolve the deadlock. Many fear this may lead to resumption of hostilities and a war.
This blame game, I think, is very dangerous, because then there's the new allegation now that India is also involved in this, and that the new relationship between New Delhi and Kabul is also encouraging the TTP in some ways, or that money is flowing somehow. We don't really know enough, but we do know there is evidence that they are in Balochistan now. And they are a threat not only to Afghanistan, but they can be a threat to Iran, they can be a threat to Central Asia, they can be a threat to China, and maybe to Pakistan itself. This was the first time that a non-Afghan entity was using airplanes on the city of Kabul. Not even the Soviets and the Americans used it.
The Soviets never used it?
Not on the city of Kabul. And then Mr. Trump is impressed by some of the things that the Pakistani leaders are doing. There are some circles that they're upset that the military option 4 years ago ended. They would have liked to see the military option continue to be part of a presence.
Military option, what does it mean?
They actually offered the Americans to come back and secure Kabul.
Who offered?
The Americans, the Taliban.
Are you serious?
And American diplomats have said it as well.
Are you serious?
Mr. Trump thinks that we should have had a different scenario emerge 4 years ago.
Oh.
And since it didn't, I'm going to blame Biden for it. Any transfer of power to a coalition government made up of Taliban and others minus the Ashraf Ghani clique.
Oh.
The others would have been anyone else.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Moeed Pirzada in Washington, United States. Joining me today in the session is Ambassador Omar Samad. I want to understand from him what is going on between Pakistan and Afghanistan, the deadlock from Doha to Istanbul in the talks about which we are continuously hearing. A few words about Ambassador Omar Samad. Ambassador Omar Samad has served as Afghanistan's ambassador to Canada and France. And in the last 20 years, he has served at various levels, executive and advisory positions with the government of Afghanistan, with the United States, think tanks, and he's currently a senior non-resident fellow with Atlantic Council, the South Asia Center in Washington, D.C., United States. Ambassador Omar Samad, a very warm welcome to you on such a short notice. Thank you so much.
Assalamu alaikum, Mr. Pirzada. Very nice to be with you. And I look forward. This is not our first interaction, but I look forward to this discussion today on a day that happened to be somewhat important for both countries.
I think it's a very troubling developments coming from Istanbul, that after 3 days of sustained discussions on the first day on Saturday, Pakistanis and Afghans, with the help of the Turkish mediators, sat down for 15 continuous hours. On Sunday, they were again meeting for 9 continuous hours. And again on Monday, the whole day, they have been battling each other, but they have not been able to reach any conclusion. What is your information and understanding about this process?
Well, it's a good question. We do not have accurate, verifiable data and information that's come out of the meetings for the last 3.5, 4 days, as you mentioned. and I am one of those who likes to deal with reality and with anything that is factual. What I can tell you from what we think is credible is that both sides obviously came here, as you mentioned, as a result of the Qatari and Turkish mediation that took place in Doha last week, a few days ago. And there was an agreement to have a ceasefire that has lasted thus far, and hopefully, inshallah, it will last longer, but we're not sure after Istanbul. But going into the Istanbul mediated sessions with Turkey and Qatar still on site, I think that what we saw was a willingness to talk, first of all,
Which is positive.
to stop fighting, and also a willingness to address certain issues. Now, there are different types of issues that Afghans and Pakistanis over the years have talked about. I have been part of several rounds of discussions. I've been part of state delegations to Pakistan. We have received Pakistanis. I was a member of the tripartite commission between the United States, Pakistan, and Afghanistan in the early years. So we're all very familiar with how these things take shape and
since you have been working at multiple levels in both advisory and executive levels, and you say there have been issues we have been debating, can you tell our viewers what are the key issues that always divide Afghanistan and Pakistan from each other?
So usually there are immediate concerns, immediate incidents that happen that have a security aspect to them. So one side sees a threat or feels that the other side is not doing enough, and that there is some kind of an element that needs to be neutralized, or somebody needs to be punished, or somebody needs to be sent a message. Usually that happens. Afghans are mostly in the defensive side. I won't say always, but in most cases, if you look back at the record, at least over the last 25 years or so, we can go back, Moeed, all the way to 1947, 48. Unfortunately, at that point, after partition, the two countries got off on the wrong footing, let's say. And some of that was actually misunderstanding. For example, the issue of Pakistani recognition at the United Nations that the Afghans did not vote for. I know for a fact, because I come from a diplomatic family, I've read the documents, I've talked to people who were involved in the past, that was not a deliberate attempt. It was miscommunication between Kabul, its embassy in London, and its embassy and mission at the United Nations. That at the time, communications were somewhat very weak and not as sophisticated as now. And so the message did not reach New York on time, and the decision was taken abruptly by someone in the hierarchy.
Interesting.
To say no. So this is a new historic fact. I've mentioned this in the past.
This is very interesting. Very interesting. So what was the message that was communicated from London that didn't reach New York in time?
So when the vote was coming up, our ambassador in the UN asked our ambassador in London to tell him what Kabul wants, because it was coming through London. And Kabul did not respond on time. And the ambassador in London informed New York to give a negative vote. He thought that is what Kabul would be saying. A day or two later, the actual Kabul response came and said, do not vote against, just take a neutral position and do not vote for and change it. If you have made a mistake, as you say, try to change it.
Kabul wanted the mission and UN to abstain from the vote.
They wanted to abstain from the vote. That is the historical record on the Afghan side.
What was the issue?
But it was too late.
Why they wanted to abstain?
The vote had been cast.
Why they wanted to abstain? What was the issue? What was the
the issue had to do with the colonial legacy and what we call the Durand Line, and the fact that the Afghan government had been told that one option is for the tribal regions to decide for themselves as to what they wanted to do. Not that Afghanistan had any claims at the time. It was just a question of making sure that there is some level of, self-rule, if that was what the people wanted. They wanted it to be a more democratic process. But partition, obviously, what the British left behind is something that not only in Afghanistan, in the Pakistan case, but in many other parts of the world, has become problematic. And so
when you use the term self-rule, which is a very important political term, self-rule for what? The erstwhile FATA areas, which are now part of the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa?
I would say that self-determination before anything else
for who? For what people?
Applied.
Self-determination for what people?
So that people in those regions, because of the fact that an agreement had been signed in 1893, which basically created de facto boundary. That the de facto boundary had never been recognized. And when the British were leaving, Pakistan was created, of course, as part of partition. And then Afghanistan was left with a fait accompli. And so they wanted to, one of the options was, why don't we ask the people of the region what they want? And they can decide. But that never happened. But over the years,
I still want to understand, because in Pakistan, I want to understand this because a very senior Pakistani military officer who is himself Pashtun, probably from Tank or somewhere, he was once mentioning to me that the Durand, and he's a great, in the sense that he's very history buff. So he said that the Durand line was drawn on the request of the Afghan rulers. I mean, they requested Mortimer Durand. He was invited on their invitation. So it's not that the Durand line in 1893 was necessarily a British colonial imposition. But
our version of history is a bit different.
Okay,
our version of history and documentation that we have at the Foreign Ministry or State Archives show that it was somewhat imposed. I don't think that at the time the King of Afghanistan or the ruler of Afghanistan could have asked the British or told the British or instructed the British to do this or that. The British were basically the lords of the day, and they decided what suited them and their security. So the Durand line was basically drawn as a result of a security issue that the British felt, not only in terms of their own forces, but in terms of what was happening north of Afghanistan with Tsarist Russia that was moving in. So the decision was made by the British to create a buffer zone. And Afghanistan's line was drawn in order to turn Afghanistan in a buffer zone between the two empires instead of clashing. So that's our version of history. But if you don't mind, history, we can talk about this for days on end, and may or may not agree on what happened or not.
I just wanted to basically expand on it a bit, because many Pakistanis think that and even whenever the Afghans are upset, like they are for the past 3 weeks or 4 weeks, they keep on saying that all Pakistan, the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa up to Attock, up to the river Indus, from where the Punjab starts, it basically belongs to Afghanistan. This is all disputed. So now you're saying that no, this is just a misunderstanding. But then you basically said that there is
I think that we need to come to terms on what is reasonable and what is acceptable and what is realistic in today's world. This is 78 years after partition. This is 130 something years after the Durand Line agreement was signed. So I don't think you can rewrite history or revise it in such a way that would hurt both of us and would hurt the potential that both countries have in terms of people-to-people, economic ties, integration, and making sure that we have access to Central Asia, to the Indian Ocean, all of that. So there is a lot that we have that we can work on instead of things that we cannot resolve immediately. But at the same time, we have to be cognizant of the fact that we did inherit a colonial legacy, right. And we had to deal with it in some ways. But over time now, I think that what we need to do is look at the more immediate both opportunities as well as threats that exist, and come up with mechanisms and come up with solutions that work for both sides. And I think this is why it was a bit disappointing to see that the talks in Istanbul today floundered. There was no result. So there are three options now left, in my opinion, Moeed, if I may. Number one is somewhat the status quo of a ceasefire exists. We will take it one day at a time and see what happens and hope that nothing will disrupt this status quo. Number two is that, well, we were very upset. We didn't get what we wanted. And now we're going to resort back to kinetics and we're going to take the military route.
Just like the Pakistan's defense minister hinted on Sunday evening.
Unfortunately, that minister, who's known to be making some type, these types of claims and allegations at times, did mention that. I think that it was unfortunate. But today, very interestingly, the Minister of Interior of Pakistan, who's visiting Tehran as part of an ECHO meeting, went in front of the cameras. I don't know if you saw it.
I saw that. He actually met the Deputy Interior Minister of Afghanistan.
Yes, greeted the Deputy Interior Minister of the Taliban regime and government and held his hand and said, well, we're all part of, I'm just paraphrasing, we're all part of a family. These things happen within a family and we will resolve it as members of a family do. So very different tone after Istanbul crashed. Very different tone coming from the Minister of Interior. Maybe he's more diplomatic than the Minister of Defense. I don't know.
More informed as well, perhaps, because he's more close to the army chief.
Well, that is the spirit that is needed. And I'm speaking as an ex-diplomat. That is the spirit that is needed in order to move in the right direction. And that means, as I was saying, the third option, obviously the second option is we go to kinetics. The third option is that we actually postpone and prolong this process. We take a break and we come back to the table. And we continue the discussions and the talks, and we pinpoint the areas that need focus, and we come up with small steps. What is lacking, as you know very well, is trust, number one. We have other things that are lacking too. But in order to rebuild trust between two nations, two governments, I don't think the nations have a problem, actually. I think it's mostly a government-to-government problem. It's a system-to-system problem. It's an establishment versus establishment problem. And then there are other elements between us who are also playing a role. So some of them are spoilers. Some of them can help. Some of them are opportunistic. Some of them can really create an environment that either is conducive to peace or conducive to war. And so motivations behind the scenes also play a role in this context, because both Afghanistan and Pakistan are very much tied to a region where there's India, China, Russia, Central Asia, Iran, and then you have the great powers who are competing against each other. And this part of the world is one of the focus for competition between, let's say, China and
Ambassador, when you talk of the motivations, I've tried researching and finding out who initiated the Doha process between Pakistan and Afghanistan on 17th, 18th, and 19th of October. Who went to Doha? Who asked Doha and Istanbul to mediate between Pakistan and Afghanistan? Afghans, Pakistan, or someone else?
I don't think that you will have an accurate answer, because one side says that the other side did it, and the other side says no, they did it. Now, there's a third possibility, that a third side may have indicated somehow or used a diplomatic messaging system to say, you guys need to stop and you need to go and talk. That's possible too. So regardless, we are beyond that point now.
So what is the actual issue, as you understand? Because Pakistan's demand is that I think the last demand which I read in the Pakistani papers, also the Afghan side, is the Pakistani side wants Afghan Taliban to declare TTP as a terrorist organization, just like Pakistan and United States have done, and then to fight it, then to exterminate it. And this is an eventuality for which the Afghan Taliban and their defense minister, Maulvi Muhammad Yaqub, is not ready.
Well, again, we don't have the exact list of demands, and we do not have the exact content of discussions that took place. But we can assume from what has been said indirectly is that, yes, TTP and the threat that Pakistan feels about the TTP militancy is a main issue. But the Afghans also have their own concerns. There is something called Daesh, which is also called Islamic State Khorasan, which now, from all indications, is situated in Balochistan. It has networks in Balochistan. Now, this is the outfit that used to be inside Afghanistan, was functioning across Afghanistan, was a spoiler in Afghanistan, and was pushed out of Afghanistan by the Taliban over the last 4 years. So there are claims, counterclaims, demands, expectations from both sides. Security is number one. Obviously, the agenda can be a very broad agenda. But right now, I think that's where it's starting. Now, I don't know if this is a good way to initiate these types of talks. Do you need other types of confidence-building measures first? Do we need to talk about soft issues first? Do we need to start somewhere else and then move to these controversial issues? I'm not going to play devil's advocate or try to lecture others, but I think that the Turks and the Qataris are very well versed in all of this. They're professionals and they mean well. And I think that the approach in this context may be the right approach. It's just that the two sides seem to be sticking to their guns and sticking to a very narrow narrative and a very narrow agenda of demands.
And I think that ISIS Khorasan, before the withdrawal of the US forces, the common Pakistani perspective and narrative about ISIS Khorasan was that it is an outfit of some Western agency which is actually being used against the Afghan Taliban within Afghanistan. Now Afghan Taliban are accusing that ISIS Khorasan is in Pakistan. What is your understanding? What is ISIS Khorasan? I mean, ISIS Khorasan to begin with was basically a Middle Eastern militancy or terrorist.
Well, the Islamic State was Middle Eastern. And ISIS is, of course, the acronym that is used, or ISIL in the Middle East. But then an offshoot emerged around 2013-14 in our region. We don't actually know much, but there are a bunch of dissatisfied jihadists, radical jihadists. But at the same time, there are all kinds of allegations about their roots and the motivations behind this group. They have been very destructive. They have been used, or they are carrying out, as you know, very extreme measures of fighting state elements.
What do they want?
They claim that they want a caliphate. And now, if that's the case, I'm not sure how it works. What I can tell you is that since their presence in the Afghan-Pakistan region, what we have recognized in Afghanistan is that their mentality, their ideology, their agenda, their program is not very well welcomed by the Afghans. It doesn't suit the Afghan mindset. It doesn't suit the Afghan psyche, and it's in clash. That's why the Taliban even had major problems with them, and they had to kick them out of Afghanistan. Now, how are they being restructured? How are they being used in Pakistan? Who is using them? Are they just in no man's land? Is it ungoverned spaces, or is there some other connection somewhere else? We don't really know enough, but we do know there is evidence that they are in Balochistan now. And they are a threat not only to Afghanistan, but they can be a threat to Iran, they can be a threat to Central Asia, they can be a threat to China, and maybe to Pakistan itself. So what is Pakistan doing about that is also a question that was raised in Istanbul.
Pakistani government is continuously accusing that Afghan Taliban and the Kabul is sponsoring, supporting, helping, using TTP as a tool against Pakistan. Many other Pakistani analysts also believe the same. So what do you think? I mean, is TTP just being there in Afghanistan, or the Afghan Taliban are actually using TTP as a tool against the state of Pakistan?
No, I don't see a reason for or a logic for Afghan Taliban, given their isolation from the world, given the fact that they're under sanctions, given the fact that they have a lot of problems at home, that they would engage in such adventurism. Yes, we do know that they were sort of like distant cousins, and that they've helped each other along the way, and that let's look at how the TTP was formed. I mean, you probably, in Pakistan, people probably know much more about it than I do. The TTP
in 2006,
became an umbrella.
In 2006.
It became an umbrella for a variety of anti-state militant groups. And they have gone through several leadership changes because of the fact that their agenda is against the military establishment in Pakistan. They would like to see some changes in the tribal regions. They would like to see more autonomy, maybe. I don't know exactly what they're asking because it's confusing, but it's from an Afghan perspective, it's a Pakistani issue. And Pakistan has to deal with it. And I think Afghans, even in the past, even under the Republic, have offered any type of help or mediation between the government in Pakistan and the TTP. If there's any way we can help, I think that even the Taliban have said so on many occasions, they would be willing to do so. But what happened is that thousands of families were pushed out as well. So you have thousands of civilians who, as a result of the military campaigns that we pushed into Afghanistan, and every time that there's something happens, they are targeted, as well as Afghan civilians. So this killing of civilians, whether it's from our side or the Pakistani side, has to stop. Maybe this is where they need to start the discussions.
So are you suggesting this thing that even before the Kabul was taken by Taliban, the Afghan Taliban, TTP was an issue that was discussed between the previous Afghan regime like Ashraf Ghani and Pakistan? TTP was also an issue?
TTP was an ally, more or less, of the Afghan Taliban. Right. And Pakistan did not have any issues with that. It is, it's ironic that the same scenario is in reverse mode now. Right. Now, the Pakistani government is complaining about the fact that the Afghans, or the Afghan Taliban de facto government, is in cahoots with the TTP in some ways, or giving some type of support, or not doing what is necessary to stop them, whereas it's their own responsibility, first and foremost, of course, to do whatever is necessary within Pakistan to address these grievances. Maybe they have some grievances that they need to discuss. But in order to, this blame game, I think, is very dangerous, because then there's the new allegation now that India is also involved in this, and that the new relationship between New Delhi and Kabul is also encouraging the TTP in some ways, or that money is flowing somehow. But these are all allegations that need proof and evidence. And one of the things that I am looking for, instead of resorting to blame games, is I want to see, if I'm at the table, I would like to see evidence and facts that are undeniable and verifiable. And that will help us address the core of the issue.
But wasn't the verification mechanism to be decided in the form of a committee in Istanbul was about the same thing? That if there are allegations of the cross-border terrorism, then Pakistan should bring the evidence and the committee should examine if this is cross-border terrorism or this is an internal terrorism. And Istanbul is supposed to have a specialization because of their widespread experiences with PKK that was operating from bases within Iraq and Syria. So, but then it changed. I think now the Pakistani demand is that the Afghan Taliban should actually should declare the TTP as a terrorist entity and basically fight against them. So but why the Afghan Taliban are not ready to throw out the TTP from Afghanistan?
Well, I mean, I think that from what I heard, the first day or two was spent discussing semantics and terms and the definition of terms and the words that are being used. You know, what is a terrorist? What is not a terrorist? What is a militant? What is a state actor? What is a non-state actor? So they spend a lot of time discussing these issues as well, from what we hear from reliable sources, which means that we don't see eye to eye on many issues. So the negotiations need to go back to some confidence building measures, first of all, soft issues that need to be addressed. You know, why should the border, the passages between the two countries and be closed, for example? Why should Chaman be closed? Why should Turkhan be closed at this moment?
As a punishment. I think it's a Pakistani side is punishing the Afghan Taliban.
Well, they're punishing, but everybody's getting hurt. I know I saw somebody the other day in the Pakistani parliament showing a tomato and saying that, look, we can't afford tomatoes because we cannot import tomatoes from Afghanistan. So everybody is suffering as a result of this. And then you have thousands and thousands of people who want to go to Pakistan for treatment, health treatment. They cannot do so. You have transit and trade that has stopped at the border, at the ports. You have access to Central Asia that has stopped. So all of this is hurting the economies, is hurting people. And I think that we need to address these issues as confidence building measures, first and foremost, and then slowly get into the nitty gritty of the security issues with proof and with evidence. And then come up with mechanisms.
You have a vantage point because you have also served in the last 20 years with Ashraf Ghani government and the Afghan governments when the US forces were there. The situation has, in a very ironical way, turned around in the sense that then the US forces, Ambassador Zalmay Khalilzad, the other people, they were basically saying that the Afghan Taliban are operating from bases within Peshawar and Quetta, and Pakistan needs to do more about it. Now the Pakistan is actually saying, the Afghan Taliban, the TTP is operating from Kabul in different places, and you need to do more about it. So was there any satisfactory solution? Was Pakistan able to find a solution then to the Afghan allegations?
Not really, no. There were band-aid solutions, not long-term durable solutions. And that's why the wound festers again and we see it reemerge. So what we need to do is have a serious discussion. Mediation is very good. I think that it's needed by parties that are credible. And both of these countries have shown to be good mediators, and we appreciate that very much. I think that it's the leadership on both sides that really need to be a bit more flexible, take a step away from the kinetics, engage in confidence-building measures and discussions on soft issues, and take measures that do not hurt our populations and our economies. And then we can address the other issues. Now, I'm not saying that this is the time to talk about the Durand line. I'm saying that maybe the Durand line is an issue that has a total different approach to it. First and foremost, Afghans need to have a discussion inside their own country about it as well. Maybe Pakistanis or maybe people in the tribal regions have to have a discussion as well. Maybe jirgas between the two countries can address some of the issues. It's the jirgas that we have on our side and jirgas you have on your tribal region side. They have at times been effective and successful in de-escalating tension. So we need to use these types of mechanisms as appropriate and as needed. But it needs an outside-the-box thinking, Moeed. I think that we're used to the same tactics. And what I'm afraid of is that this may escalate into something that we do not want. It may
escalate into what? I think
it may escalate into an opportunity for a proxy war to take place. Proxy war meaning that.
But if you look at from the kind of rhetoric that is emerging from Pindi and Islamabad, they see themselves as a nuclear power. They're saying that we don't have any intentions on Afghan soil. It's a different thing. We are not invaders. We're not going to conquer Afghanistan, but we're going to punish them. I mean, through the air force and through the drone strikes. And Afghan government doesn't have the air force and the drones. And even when the US was there and Pakistan had given permission, my understanding was, and United States conducted more than 300, if not more, drone strikes into Pakistan against the TTP hideouts in the Afghan Taliban. I think they also killed an Afghan Taliban leader. So Pakistan can continue to do the same inside Afghanistan, right? They're saying we are only...
But that runs counter to international law, runs counter to humanitarian law. When you kill civilians, and only in the past 2-3 weeks, we've had hundreds of civilians killed on both sides, including civilians in the city of Kabul, something that Afghans will not forget. They cannot forget the fact that after 1919, when the British bombed Kabul during the Third Anglo-Afghan War, this was the first time, with the exception of drones that are being used occasionally, this was the first time that a non-Afghan entity was using airplanes on the city of Kabul. Not even the Soviets and the Americans used it.
The Soviets never used it?
Not on the city of Kabul.
And
so planes have been used to run over, and during a coup by an Afghan pilot, maybe something was done, but a drone was maybe used to target a terrorist.
Are you saying that in 20 years of conflict, the United States has never used Air Force inside Kabul?
Inside Kabul? To bomb the city of Kabul? No.
And the Soviets?
The Soviets neither.
What about the Soviet gunship, helicopters and everything?
They were all outside of Kabul. So what I'm saying is the symbolism. It's like Afghans sending an airplane to bomb Islamabad.
But Afghans don't have this. I mean, if Afghans had that kind of balance of power, then perhaps Pakistan would be a little conscious of that, you know. The problem...
Well, I hope we don't reach that point where we are trying to solve this problem by escalating and by becoming more militaristic. I think that what we need to do is de-escalate and use less of the military. I think Afghans have other means if they wanted to defend themselves, if they had to do something to hurt somebody else. Afghans have other means to do it. Every country has means to use other methods to hurt someone in your capital or in this city or that city or my city. So we don't want to take that route. I think we should avoid taking that route.
Ambassador, I also do an Urdu vlog. I have maintained this continuous position on my social media and on my videos that Pakistan should not strike, whatever the reason is, Pakistan should not use Air Force and drones inside Afghanistan. This is my stated position. However, I'm just putting forward the way the Pakistani authorities are looking at it. They see we have a powerful Air Force. They see we have drones. They see Afghanistan doesn't have the air.
Moeed, the Soviet Union had 100 times more equipment and armament and planes than Pakistan, and it is a superpower and a nuclear power. It was a superpower, it's a nuclear power. The United States used the mother of all bombs on Afghanistan. And the United States dropped many bombs to counter the opposition groups. And it is it's a superpower and a nuclear power. But both of them, after a few years, left. So even though this is not an issue of invading or occupying a country, we are neighbors. We have 2,500 and something kilometers of border.
2,600 kilometers.
I'm sorry?
2,600 kilometers. More than
2,600 kilometers of borders. So we need to live next to each other. We need to find common ground. We need to be able to interact, and we need to be able to trade, and we need to de-escalate all of these tensions. Both sides are responsible. I'm not one of those who puts all the blame and all the responsibility on one side or the other. Both sides are responsible. They have their own responsibility, but we need to deal with reality and facts and evidence. We cannot become a proxy for somebody else. We cannot allow others to turn either one of these countries into proxy battlefields. I think that is one of the lessons that we as Afghans have learned over the last 50 years of our existence.
Ambassador, looking at the position of the spokespersons and so many apologists for the Pakistani regime, I have come to understand that they believe this thing, that whereas the Soviet Union and United States were running a government, they had the cities and the structure, they were responsible for the governance, and the Afghans in both instances, the Mujahideen and subsequently Afghan Taliban, could afford a guerrilla fight. In case of Pakistan, they are not going to run Afghanistan. What they have discussed, what they have actually found out a formula, or they have created a formula under the Pakistan Army Chief is that anything that happens in Pakistan, they're going to attack a site in Afghanistan. So this is a totally new kind of situation. The Americans were not doing it. The Soviets were not doing it. Soviets never attacked inside Pakistan apart from power projection. The Americans were making the drone strikes with the permission of the Pakistani side. The Pakistani military has created a new formula. So what you're actually saying refers back to the last 50 years. They're saying anything happens in Peshawar, anything happens in Fata, we're going to...
If the Pakistani military has found a new formula, the same way that Afghans found a new formula against the Soviets and others who came to Afghanistan, or anyone who has been a threat to Afghanistan, whether domestic or otherwise, they will find a new formula. So unfortunately, this is the logic of war. And yes, Pakistan is much more powerful. Pakistan has a bigger army, much more professional than what we have. We are still ragtag. We are an isolated, non-recognized. The Taliban are. Afghanistan is in a very precarious.
I'm curious. You use the term "we," but you are not part of the Afghan Taliban. When you say "we," would you?
No. When I'm talking about the national interest, the national, the Afghans overall, generally, when it comes to, this is not a question of dividing the Afghans. Some people try to do that, but when our territory is under threat, when our people, innocent people, are being killed, when sovereignty is under assault, then obviously it's not a question of whether you're a Taliban or a communist or a Democrat. It's a question of what position do you take vis-a-vis your country.
So are you then, if I correctly understand, that these Pakistani attacks on Kabul and Afghanistan are sort of uniting the Afghan people irrespective of the fact whether they're pro-Taliban or not?
I think with the exception of some circles and some segments of society who may either not feel, loyal to anything, and maybe even to a single unitary state, there are some Afghans now who don't believe in a unitary state, that the overwhelming majority of Afghans obviously will feel offended when their capital city is attacked. Who wouldn't?
Interesting. So how do you look at this 1 week long visit of the Afghan foreign minister to Delhi, and very warm embrace by Delhi, India's decision to upgrade their technical office and to the level of an embassy? So do you think that India will stay isolated from Pakistan-Afghanistan conflict, or will actually be sucked in on the side of the Afghan Taliban?
Well, every country in the region has expressed itself, including India. India's last statement on the conflict was a bit more severe and a bit more direct in terms of its relationship with Pakistan, of course, and the fact that India thinks that Pakistan is using terrorist proxies or terrorist groups against Indian interests. So the whole Kashmir issue between India and Pakistan. Yes, Afghanistan has at times been, I don't know if I would use the word victim, but has been affected by the Kashmir issue and by tensions between India and Pakistan.
How is Pakistan affected by the Kashmir issue?
Well, I mean, if you are thinking that India is your enemy and that India and Afghanistan have warm relations and you cannot tolerate normal relations between India and Pakistan, and you're cutting the flow of trade between India and Afghanistan through your territory, that obviously means that you are trying to control the foreign policy of two other countries, or at least one of them. And if Pakistan thinks that it can control the foreign policy of Afghanistan like the British did prior to independence, I think that it's a losing game. I think that there are better ways of addressing the issues instead of trying to say that I'm going to determine whether you should have a relationship, what kind of relationship we should have with India or China or Russia or Iran or anybody. Afghanistan, again, at the end of the day, is a sovereign state and it has its own rights, even though it has issues right now with the international community. And the Taliban have issues with both Afghan people and the international community. But at the end of the day, the same thing applies to Pakistan as it applies to Afghanistan.
Is there any
So,
progress? Are you based in Washington? You working with Atlantic Council? Is there any progress with United States and Western world recognizing Afghan Taliban the way Russia, China, and India? Because of course, I mean, only Russia has recognized formally, but Russia, China, Iran, Pakistan, India, they all have their embassies in Kabul. Is there any?
in many others. So what we see is a trend, and some are more advanced in their engagement with the Taliban than others. The West, and especially the United States, is not as advanced. There's still a lot of reluctance. There's a lot of angst. There's a lot of bad memories from Afghanistan. Some are emotional about it still, but it depends on what the new leadership in the United States is thinking. The fact that they hosted Pakistan's leaders 2-3 times in the White House and CENTCOM and other places says that at least military to military, there's some warmth, a transactional relationship somewhere. Now, the question is Afghanistan part of this equation or not? And if it is, in what way? For what purpose and with what goal in mind? But we are at the distance from this. I think that the Americans are mostly watching, observing. Mr. Trump, as you know, 2-3 times in the past few days has offered to step in and mediate.
Exactly. I wanted to ask you. I mean, what do you make of it? The Trump's offer to.
Well, it's Mr. Trump. I think it's part of his mindset that he feels that he has resolved many issues around the world, and that anything else that pops up, like Afghanistan-Pakistan tensions, if there's a need for him to step in, he would do so. Now, is he saying it as part of a strategy, or is he saying it as part of a Trump reaction? As we have seen in other cases, is it part of a program, or is it a standalone issue? It's not clear yet. We will see. In the future, we will see
What do you make of the Trump? What do you make of the Trump statements on Bagram Air Base? That he's in talks with. He wants Bagram Air Base. Do you see any other player within the United States? Any other influential lobby?
So the Bagram issue started out first during the campaign against Mr. Biden. So it was used as a campaign rhetoric and a campaign weapon against Mr. Biden.
Okay.
Then once Mr. Trump won, on a few occasions he's mentioned Bagram, and at one point he said that we are discussing this, and if it doesn't happen, there's going to be some bad things that are going to happen. So it's on the back of his mind, because he remembers it from 2019-20 when it was being discussed in Doha between the Americans and the Taliban at the time, who were looking at Bagram as a possibility for some kind of a counterterrorism cooperation hub, a multinational one, maybe involving some intelligence services who would be looking at what's happening in order to fight terrorism. And maybe Mr. Trump thinks that he would like to have access to that kind of a venue. But it's something, but times have.
But what if the Pakistan, Afghanistan again enter into a 1 week or 10 days long war and airstrikes, and then Trump jumps in, steps in, settles and gives peace, and in return he expects Afghan Taliban to give him the Bagram Air Base. What about that?
He's going to have to convince the Taliban and whoever else that they need to sit down and have a talk. If it's going to be usage of force, if it's going to be, again, kinetics, if it's going to be
he's not using kinetics. Pakistan is using kinetics.
Or as I said, or use somebody else to use kinetics, then we are back to the same situation. There are better ways. In everything you have bad and good, better and worse. In politics as well, and geopolitics, you have choices. And I think that we have to look at the choices very carefully and see if there's a better choice to discuss an issue, whether it's counterterrorism, whether it's some kind of cooperation, whether it's opening an embassy. We need to look at the options, and we need to decide collectively together on what's best in order to come to a win-win solution instead of a lose-lose solution.
But Ambassador, apart from the Bagram Air Base, you are in DC. You have worked in this city and this culture for so long. I mean, you've been educated in the US. You have contacts, connectivity. Do you see there's any palpable desire in the Washington power centers to destabilize Afghanistan once again for any kind of strategic reasons?
There are some circles that they're upset that the military option 4 years ago ended. They would have liked to see the military option continue to be part of a presence.
Military option, what does it mean?
The presence of US forces, even if small, or some type of military involvement in Afghanistan. And I think that the actual program, and we're getting into something, a very complex issue of what the negotiations were all about and what came out of it and what was supposed to come of it. And so I think that Mr. Trump thinks that we should have had a different scenario emerge 4 years ago.
Oh.
And since it didn't, I'm going to blame Biden for it. And
Okay.
I'm also going to see if I can rectify it. But the situation has changed. So my rectification or my solution is not going to look the same way as it did before. So it's a new solution.
So since Trump had authorized and kick-started the Doha process, what was the kind of outcome President Trump, if he had not lost the presidency, was expecting out of the process?
Very good question, Moeed. I think that what you would have seen is an end to the American military presence in Afghanistan, a departure without chaos, a better managed withdrawal, and a transfer of power to a coalition government made up of Taliban and others minus the Ashraf Ghani clique.
Oh.
The others would have been anyone else who was part of the Afghan political scenery. I think Pakistan was also very much on board with this.
Okay.
Later on, they may have changed their mind when the Taliban were left as the only player in Kabul, because that process was sabotaged. And that process was basically did not materialize because of the fact that on one hand, the president of the country fled at the last moment, created a vacuum. In the vacuum,
Your previous boss, Ashraf Ghani.
Well, somebody needs to go and ask him some of these questions.
Have you spoken with him ever?
No, I have not. No, I actually resigned. I was appointed as ambassador to go to Brussels and in charge of the EU and NATO, all of that. But I did not. I even though my agreement came, but I resigned in protest because I did not believe that the solution was more war. I believe that we needed to, while we had leverage, we needed to use the leverage smartly and make sure that we have a political settlement. And I believe that a political settlement would have been better for Afghanistan than one side losing completely and the other side winning completely.
So why do you think, I mean, this is a very interesting point that actually came towards the very much end when we wanted to wind up the discussion, that Trump had a different outcome in mind. He was expecting the transfer of power to a coalition of Afghan elements that include the Afghan Taliban plus other elements, maybe the Northern Alliance and, Hamid Karzai.
Well, I mean, whoever else was in the country,
So
yes.
And you said the Pakistanis were also on board. They also didn't want Afghan Taliban to capture the whole power. So how come a totally different outcome when Pakistanis were on board with the Americans? How a totally different outcome actually materialized?
The vacuum left one element in charge. There was no other option. They actually offered the Americans to come back and secure Kabul.
Who
and
offered?
The Taliban. They have said it. It's on the record.
Are you serious?
And American diplomats have said it as well.
Are you serious?
On the last day, they offered the Americans to return to Kabul as they were leaving. They had not left fully. They were on the verge of leaving on that chaotic day. And they asked the Americans to come back and secure Kabul because they were thinking that if we enter the city, we would clash with the government forces and it would be a bloodbath. And they wanted to avoid that. So they've said, come and secure it, and then we'll continue the negotiations. And that never happened because the Americans said, we don't have orders to come back. We have orders to leave the country. So we are not prepared to come back. And the only option left was for the Taliban to step in.
I'm reminded of a briefing which Pakistan's then DG ISI, General Faiz Hamid, and Pakistan's Army Chief, General Bajwa, did for about 40 plus journalists in ISI's headquarters, either in June of 2021 or in the beginning of the July 2021, in which they gave their assessment that Afghan government Kabul has more than 300,000 troops, 350,000 troops, and their estimate was this, that even after the gradual withdrawal of the US forces, there will be a war going on for the next 1 year and so, and Taliban would not be able to occupy Kabul so quickly. However, within the same briefing, there were Pashtun journalists of Pakistan, and they said that Pakistani army is deliberately creating a misinformation because the Afghan National Army is in no mood to fight, and they will vacate the cities and they will run away. These were the ethnic people.
Nobody could have predicted that. I mean, nobody predicted the disintegration of the Afghan forces within just a period of a few days and no more than 3 weeks. And Kabul, as the last bastion and the most important bastion, nobody thought that there would be no resistance whatsoever, and that the forces would totally disintegrate, and that there would be no clashes, no fighting, and that a city of 6 million would fall into Taliban hands. Even the Taliban themselves did not think that that would happen. It was not part of their strategic thinking. Maybe some of them hoped that it would happen, but it was not part of their planning.
This is totally something new. But having said this, what you have said, then could it be this, that in the Trump's mind and some of the top decision makers in CENTCOM, they think that we need to use Pakistan to force Afghan Taliban into a different kind of political outcome in which there can be a power sharing agreement, there can be a decision about the Bagram Air Base, we can bring the opposition and the coalition into Kabul. I mean, could it be a possibility? I mean, do you smell something like this?
It was definitely a possibility back then, and they were all working towards it. And it wasn't just the other countries around us were more or less going along with it as well. So there was a bit of a consensus on this, but that consensus is broken. We are not in 2021 anymore. We're in 2025, soon to go into 2026. The environment is different. The ecosystem is different. The players have different interests. The division between East and West and North and South is more acute. Alignments are not the same. And I think that geopolitics and geostrategy has shifted. So I'm not sure. I'm not saying that it's not possible. I'm not saying, but it has to be part, again, it cannot be part of another major military operation or occupation or invasion or anything, whether through proxies or direct, because that would be, I think, counterproductive. And maybe some people prefer that, but it would not be good for any of the
European countries have not recognized the Afghan Taliban government. The United Nations has not recognized them. Pakistan picks up a kinetic conflict. Afghan Taliban have no solution for the TTP. Pakistan keeps on doing the kinetic actions against the Afghan Taliban. And could this not force the Afghan Taliban for a different political solution?
Well, the Afghan Taliban would have to think hard about what is best for them and for what's best for the country. I hope they think about the country first. But the Afghan Taliban also have been around for more than 30 years, and they are hard-headed, as we know. They can be difficult to deal with, and they are very, at times, very astute negotiators. So if we take the path of negotiations and talks, who knows, maybe there's a chance for some type of formula. But if we take the path of war and destruction and mayhem again, I'm not sure that there's going to be a good outcome for the Afghans especially, but also for others in this very volatile region of the world.
My last set of questions, I know that you have an early morning sessions. We have touched upon a number of subjects. What if the Afghan Taliban are not able to find a credible solution for the TTP? What if the TTP is not the actual problem? Can Afghan Taliban just get rid of the TTP to find peace with Pakistan? Are you expecting something like that happening in the next several days and weeks?
I think that there has to be, I believe always in flexibility. I believe in give and take in negotiations. I believe in taking a step towards and reciprocity, seeing a step being taken. I think that if you have that kind of an approach and you understand what's at stake, then you can find ways to sort of come up with a solution that all sides can agree to, and it may not be the perfect solution. See, if we are aiming for zero-sum outcomes, if Pakistan says, get rid of the Pakistani Taliban for me, I don't know if the Afghan Taliban are able to deliver and do that. And they would come back and say, well,
not expel the TTP leadership from Afghanistan. I mean, also smelling that this is not the real reason.
I mean, I think they've done whatever is possible to either expel or prevent them from staging anything from Afghanistan, or even I've heard that they've taken them to more remote areas of Afghanistan, away from the Durand line. So we have solutions to a problem that doesn't need a hammer. So we can maybe take that route, but we need to not be requesting and demanding and expecting things that cannot be delivered, because then that raises the question of what else is happening. Why are you asking for something that I cannot deliver?
Because I'm actually saying the same thing. Maybe the TTP is not the real issue. Maybe there is a geostrategic thing.
Right.
Maybe TTP is only an excuse.
So obviously the Taliban are thinking along those lines as well, as they think that there may be something else, and they need guarantees and assurance as well. Both sides need some breathing space. And how do you create the breathing space? Is by de-escalating, by showing an intent to discuss things and looking at it from a technical perspective if possible, and using mediation as well. All of these things have been tried, but should continue to be tried as well, because the other options, again, are pretty bleak for everyone. Even though Pakistan may feel that it's much more powerful and it can control the situation, I'm not sure.
I have a very interesting brainwave. So Russia is the only country that has actually recognized the Afghan Taliban government. Do you think this provides Russia an opportunity to actually come and be a player in the region once again? Russia,
well, I mean,
China,
one of
India.
the complications that I'm alluding to, and I'm not spelling it out, is the regional dimension. So when it spirals out of control, and when it involves more than one entity, it can become something bigger. And so this is what I'm saying, is to avoid this issue becoming something bigger that would be detrimental to some, to many maybe, but could benefit one or two at the end of the day. We are not sure. But how would it change the calculus and the strategic calculus is a question that I don't have an answer for.
Ambassador Omar Samad, thank you so much. Thanks for finding.
Thank you, Moeed. I appreciate it. I enjoyed it.